What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And joining me today, Jimmy Watkins, cleveland.com columnist, and we're coming to you guys after the Cavs' latest loss, 124-102 to the Atlanta Hawks. And Jimmy, we don't necessarily have to go through the matchup itself. It was ugly. The Cavs got down early, and they never really wanted to win this game in the first place. So it all made sense. And credit to the two-way guys and the end of rotation guys for making this game look more respectable than it actually was. We know that the Atlanta Hawks got up to a 36-point lead at one point in this contest, and they ended up winning by just 22. So, Jimmy, we're not here to talk about this contest, again, for multiple reasons. We're here to talk about what happened around the league and why this sets the Cavs up where they want to be. The standings now sit in the Eastern Conference with the New York Knicks slotted into the number 3 seed due to their victory tonight over Toronto. And with the Cavs' loss, it slots them in as the number 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. So now basically it's up to the 5, 6, and 7 seeds to determine who is going to play the New York Knicks and who is going to play the Cleveland Cavaliers. And Jimmy, there's a lot going on here, a lot of moving pieces, but I wanted to do my best to break it all down and get your thought, your perspective on the two matchups particularly, and then also what could be coming down the pipeline for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So, with the wins tonight for New York and the Atlanta Hawks are in the number 5 seed, which means that it comes down to the final game of the regular season to decide seeding. And this will be decided if Atlanta wins in Miami Sunday or not, and looking around the league when it comes to a potential 3-way tie in the standings in record between Orlando, Toronto, and Atlanta. But first and foremost, if Atlanta wins, then they would face off against the Cleveland Cavaliers as the number 5 seed in the first round. If Atlanta loses, they play against New York as the number 6 seed. That would mean that the Toronto Raptors would have to win their final game as well, because they have a tiebreaker over the Atlanta Hawks. In case there is a 3-team tie that would finish 46-36 on the season, the first criteria in this 3-team tie is division winner, which would be the Atlanta Hawks. This scenario would lead it to be Atlanta, Toronto, Orlando, which would still make the Atlanta Hawks the first matchup for the Cleveland Cavaliers in the first round of the postseason. Jimmy, that's a lot. That's a mouthful. What are your initial takeaways from all of the semantics going on around the league and a season and positioning and seeding coming down to Sunday, game 82? We always talk about game 7. Game 82 might mean something.
My first takeaway is that, to paraphrase Raven Simone from The Cosby Show back in the day, I'm glad that this is not my job. Glad that this is not my job to figure out these tiebreakers, because there's a lot of moving parts here. The main thing here for the Cavs is that they are in the 4 seed. They're on the 4 seed line, and they are now going to be locked in against the Detroit Pistons in the second round, potential second round. Whoever it ends up being, whether it's Toronto, Atlanta, Orlando, frankly, none of that should matter. If the Cavs are the team that they think they are, that the James Harden move signifies they think they are, that they say they are, then it really shouldn't matter which of those 3 teams they end up playing. They should handle them. They should beat them. They should advance. And then we'll be looking forward to a second round series against the Detroit Pistons. Or, again, I am still not ready to pencil in Detroit depending on who they play in the first round. Detroit-Charlotte in the first round, with Kate still working his way back. The Charlotte Hornets have the best net rating in the Eastern Conference since January. I think it's like January 22nd. And they have like a top 4 net rating for the season now. So the Detroit Pistons, depending on how the cookie crumbles here, they might be getting a second round series in the first round if they draw the Charlotte Hornets. I'm not penning that team in. The Pistons have not, this core has not won a playoff series together. They have an incredible defense. Cade Cunningham's an amazing offensive engine, but their lack of shooting and their lack of secondary creation still concerns me. That's why it's important that the Cavs are in the 4-5 line, because I think that the Pistons are a much, much, much better matchup for them in the second round, particularly given all of the moving parts the Cavs have had this season because of the Harden trade, because of Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis getting acclimated, because of all the injuries they've had. Like, this team just hasn't had a ton of time to gel together. And I think that matters, especially when we're talking about down the road when we're comparing the Pistons and the Celtics, which are were the two potential second round matchups for the Cavs. If they were the 3 seed, they would have ended up playing Boston in the second round. If they were now that they're the 4 seed, it's Detroit that they'd be looking ahead to. Again, we think. Here's some numbers for you. We just mentioned Detroit has never won a series together as a core. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have won 13 playoff series together. They've played in 19. They've won a championship. They've been to 2 finals. That matters. For as much as we want to talk about toughness and schematics, all that stuff, I think one of the Cavs' biggest issues the last couple of years has been playoff inexperience, and the Celtics have experience in space. Go further into their rotation. Hauser, Derek White, those kinds of guys, Peyton Pritchard, those guys have done this before. They are battle tested. So if I'm the Cavs and I'm still searching for the right, Jalen Tyson came back tonight. Is he part of the 9-man rotation? Dennis Schroeder, Keon Ellis, they're still searching for their best 9. Kenny said about a week and a half ago, I don't think I'm going to be able to he wanted to get a 9-man rotation down before the playoffs. He admitted, I don't think that's going to be able to happen. Dean Wade started the other night, and then Max Strus closed. What's your best 5? They still don't know that. The Celtics know what they're doing. So when you have that, when that is such a factor, that continuity, that and in a situation where the Cavs, particularly on defense, they're going to need to be communicate. They don't have necessarily the best personnel on the perimeter. So they're going to have to be crisp in their rotations and their communication. That's going to have to be a big part of who they are on that end of the floor. That's going to be part of their identity there. I'm trying to push back Boston as far as I possibly can. And that's was clinched tonight. And I think that's a really, really, really big deal given everything that's at stake ahead of this postseason run.
I think we continue to keep getting ahead of ourselves, Jimmy, and obviously we talk about all 3 potential series, and that comes with the territory. But the Cavs do have to get past this first round series, whether that's Toronto, whether that's Atlanta. We understand that both teams pose difficulties for them, and as we mentioned about Atlanta, we kind of went in depth with that in perspective with Chris the other day. Toronto, we talked about the bigs being a potential advantage against Atlanta, and we saw that again with Evan Mobley going at the Atlanta Hawks center, Onyeka Okongwu. But they can't necessarily do that against Pirtle, against Mamu in Toronto, right? Those 2 guys are big, they're strong, they're 7 foot tall, just like Evan Mobley. They can match up a little bit differently. That's where the guard play comes into hand. But there's also the thought process of, oh, the Cavs have struggled against lengthy wings, some long teams, some athletic teams. And obviously RJ Barrett, Brandon Ingram, and Scotty Barnes fall into those categories. Emmanuel quickly, even. But I still think we would give the advantage to Donovan Mitchell, James Harden in that and obviously Dean Wade being available and likely being the starting small forward. I think that is extremely important to keep in mind when it comes to just the rotation, the roster construction, all these things going ahead. Then you look a little bit further, and we've already talked about all the Detroit Pistons are potentially going to be their second round opponent. We both said that we would like that series, but does Detroit, with an injured Cade Cunningham, who did look good in his return, be able to get past whoever that number 7 seed, whether that's the Charlotte Hornets, whether that's Philadelphia, whether that's Orlando, right? Who knows? I think it's interesting that we continue to look forward, and there's still so much to learn. There's still so much to dissect when it comes to the postseason. You never know what's going to happen. You can predict, but there's still a lot of questions that are left unanswered, not just for the Cavaliers, but for the rest of the Eastern Conference. Because as we've continuously said this season, the Eastern Conference is wide open, and injuries continue to make that fact even more certain.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you're right to say that the Cavs can't be looking ahead. The Atlanta Hawks, I think, are of the 3 teams that are on the table right now, Atlanta, Orlando, and Toronto, they are best equipped to give the Cavs a bit of a run for their money. They have the 3-point shooting and they have the 3-point willingness. They get those shots up there, and that's going to add some variance to a potential playoff series. The more 3-pointers you shoot, the more randomness you're inviting. The Cavs are a really good they're a really good team at generating and making 3-pointers. So are the Atlanta Hawks. And I think that in a small sample, 5, 6, 7 game sample, that's where the door opens a little bit for the talent advantage the Cavs clearly have over Atlanta to be negated a little bit. If the Cavs have a bad shooting night or two against Atlanta, it's going to be compounded both because Atlanta, could swing the math their way if they're hitting their threes, and because Atlanta thrives in transition and what missed threes create are long misses, and long misses can be transition fuel, right? So I think the Hawks would be probably the most challenging of those three. Toronto has a little bit of that same transition game to them. They're not quite as adept from 3 point range. More of a streaky shooting team. They have more guys that you can hide some of your weaker defenders on, some guys that you can frankly ignore on the offensive end if they're not on the ball. And Orlando, we've seen that movie before. I don't really know what to make of the Magic at this point. They were one of the most disappointing teams in the East for most of the year and for most of the last month and a half. But now they got Franz Wagner back and they've won a few in a row, and they're a talented team. I would say of those three teams, they probably have the slimmest talent gap between the Cavs and Team X is probably the Cavs and the Orlando Magic. And of course, we already know the Cavs and the Magic have played a very competitive 7 game series 2 years ago. Obviously, a lot has changed for both of those teams since then, particularly with the Cavs, with James Harden being a little bit more of a playoff tested guy than Darius Garland was, and better suited to handle Orlando's physicality. But I think that's how I would stack it up. Atlanta is the most dangerous team because of the variance. Orlando's the most talented team. And then Toronto, as much as I respect their defense and I think they're well coached and I think they have some interesting pieces, if we're talking first round series, it's probably the team I'd want to play.
I think there's another layer to this, right? Obviously, Orlando would have to do a whole lot. A lot would have to happen for Orlando to jump up to the number 5 seed. But I don't think the Cavs would want to face Orlando and then potentially also have to face Detroit before potentially having to face Boston. We go back to the injury conversation, Jimmy. We continuously talk about how injuries and health can change a playoff season, not just a playoff series, a season. And if the Cavs have to go through two of the most physical teams in the Eastern Conference just to get to Boston, I think there's a very low possibility that they go into that Eastern Conference Finals series fully healthy. Right. And I think that's another variable that you have to keep in mind. And Atlanta, as quick as they play, they're not necessarily banging bodies with you. They're pace space and trying to figure out where they can make advantages. And the Cavs are kind of the same way. We talked about it the other night about how Jared Allen and Evan Mobley are more finesse than they are body to body offensive players, right? That bodes well for we're going against the Atlanta Hawks, as we mentioned with Onyeka Okongwu, and obviously not necessarily having a true center. They like to space the floor. But Toronto, to me, again with the bigs and their caliber, I still think Atlanta. I'm on the same page with you. I still think Atlanta is the biggest test because of their pace, their 3 point shooting that you mentioned. But I do think that the Cavs cannot sleep on Toronto. And I think every team that they would have to face in the first round, this is why I said you can't look away from it. You can't look past it. I think every team that they potentially would have to face in the first round would give them a certain test, whether that's physicality and mental and physical toughness, or whether that's keeping up with pace and their perimeter defense, whether that's dealing with length. I think there's an area where the Cavs can be like, hey, if we get past this opponent, we're proving X, Y, and Z. We're proving we can do this against a high caliber team that got here and that is fighting for this spot that we have either struggled with already in the regular season or in the past. So I think that's what is important to keep in mind when it comes to the first round. And then again, second round is something we'll talk about when we get there.
Yeah, for sure. I think once we get the standings solidified, we'll have a better idea of how to break this down. But as it stands, I think that they have about the best path that you could have asked for. Again, I know people don't like the idea of like ducking Boston until a certain point, and the idea would be if you're going to have to play them anyway. But like I said on the last podcast, when James Harden and Donovan Mitchell need a bucket at the end of the game, right? Do they go with the best defender every time? No, that's what the defense wants them to do. They call for a screen from a player who's being guarded by a weaker defender. They try to get a switch and they attack a weaker defender and they get an easier bucket. Like the playoffs are so matchup dependent. You can lose to a team. Last year is a perfect example. I don't think the Indiana Pacers were a more talented team than the Cavs. I think they just played a style. Obviously, the Cavs had injuries, but I think they played a style the Cavs had not prepared for and seen very often over the course of the season. They had a player in Tyrese Halliburton who was super unique in his ability to impose and control the pace of play. It's not just about the playoffs is a lot about styles make fights, but it's how do you make someone play your style, right? And Tyrese Halliburton is such a talented point guard, such a tone setter that he forced the Cavs to play at the Pacers' pace. That was a bad matchup for them. The two bigs and against a team that likes to get up and down, like the Pacers were outrunning them a lot of the time, right? That's another reason that I think this is a good matchup for the Cavs because the Pistons kind of have one mode, and it's be physical and drag you in the mud. The Cavs play pretty basketball. The Cavs are going to swing the math in a series like that. And that's a hard thing to like. I don't know that Detroit is the most adaptable basketball team. Their defense is really good and will keep them in games. I feel like we do a lot of talking about what Detroit doesn't have. What they do have is an incredible defense and one of the best players in the East. Like, I'm open to a conversation about this year. Kate Cunningham was the best player in the East. We can talk about that. Beyond that, though, like once you force the ball out of Cade's hands, I have questions. Great offense beats great defense at the end of the day. The Cavs have enough. They have two elite creators. They have enough shooting that I think that they can get their offense to a level where, like, can you reach that if you're Detroit? So I think you got to be from the stylistic perspective, from a matchup perspective. I think you got to be feeling good about where the Cavs are at this point.
And Jimmy, to your point about the injury report being flooded, right? Not even as bad as it has been in the regular season for this Cavs team. But this is going to be the expectation for fan appreciation night on Sunday against the Washington Wizards, especially after the Cavs solidified their number 4 seeding, right? So we understand that there's going to be a lot of players either on injury management or out. But even for tonight's game, my question for fans would be who is resting or injury management and you would have wanted them to play. Donovan Mitchell has an injury history throughout the postseason. He's not only dealing with an ankle injury, but he's still dealing with the groin injury that had lingered throughout the regular season. Oh, and remember, there was also 2 past postseasons, consecutive past postseasons, where he was dealing with a calf injury, ankle injury, calf injury. Not necessarily related, but they're close enough where you still want to be careful. Jared Allen, we talked about it on a recent podcast. I thought he shouldn't have played since he came back. Jared Allen has been dealing with so much, and sure, you got to learn how to play through severe knee tendonitis to be able to be productive, especially in the postseason. But my goodness, did he look like he was laboring? He didn't have the explosiveness that made him so great in February. James Harden talked about how he's a speed roller. You did not see that since he's returned. He's been doing the I'm just going to set this hard screen and stay here. I'm not necessarily rolling as hard because I simply can't move at that angle or get my body to contort that way that quickly. Sam Merrill, he's been dealing with left hamstring injuries. You know how bad it would be for Sam Merrill to have a hamstring injury, one of the best off ball movers, one of the best 3-point shooters in the NBA this season, and you're not going to have him available because he was out there running against the Atlanta Hawks, who you wanted to lose against tonight? That didn't make sense to me for why fans would have wanted him to be out there. I think it was good that Jalen Tyson got to play. He got to show that he's not dealing with the same kind of injury that Darius Garland was. Was he at 100% tonight? No. Was he good tonight? Still no, but he was out there getting reps up, right? And Thomas Bryant sat out because he's dealing with a left calf strain. Excuse me. Big red lights, calf. I know Thomas Bryant isn't supposed to get a whole lot of minutes in the postseason, but if Jared Allen can't go, who are you turning to? Evan Mobley's not playing 48 minutes. And we know that the fan base is going to be livid if Dean Wade is playing the 5 for a long stretch in the playoffs, right? So Thomas Bryant, you need him to be healthy and available. And if he's dealing with something now, you give him this window. You probably don't even play him on Sunday. You see how long it takes for this next week before they play on Saturday or Sunday of next week, the 18th or the 19th, I believe. You give these guys the time that they need so that they're ready. Kenny Atkinson has consistently talked about peaking at the right time. That's not just style of play. That's not just schematics. That is health and making sure everybody is available and playing where they're comfortable, not just playing through pain because they feel like they need to be out there, playing comfortable at the right times. And that time is right around the corner.
The Jared injury has a chance to make a I'm not gonna say define, but make a major difference in this postseason run. I wonder if the other night I'm with you, Ethan. If there was a chance for Jared Allen knee to get better by the playoffs, then I would be confused as to why he played the other night. I don't think his knee is going to be better by the playoffs. I think that's probably why he played the other night. I think they wanted to give him a test run in a playoff-ish environment and see what can you do? What do you have right now? What's your baseline so that we can work off of that going forward? Obviously, next week they'll have the week off because of the play-in stuff, so we'll see how he comes out on the other side of that. The fact that he did play the other night shows me that they're working through some stuff there, right? And given the Cavs' perimeter defensive issues right now, it is so, so, so important that they have both Jared and Evan to protect the rim. Whether two bigs, obviously, all the Cavs' best defensive lineups involve two bigs or one big and Dean Wade, right? But like having two elite rim protectors is so crucial when you're having the breakdowns that the Cavs are having on the perimeter right now. Like, let's just be honest here. The Cavs' perimeter defense sort of is what it is right now. Like, James Harden's gonna get blown by sometimes. Max Strus is gonna get blown by sometimes. They're gonna be too small on the wings sometimes. That just needs to be acknowledged. And when that happens, it helps to have one or two of the best rim protectors in the NBA behind you. When you take away one of them, just one, Evan Mobley has been incredible. Evan Mobley has been incredible recently during this run. Against the other night against the Hawks, Evan Mobley was Defensive Player of the Year. Evan Mobley. He was patrolling the rim. He was shutting it down. What happens when he sits? If Jared Allen's not moving around the right way? Like, love Thomas Bryant. Super good guy. Super energetic. Has been one of the best value signings at the end of the bench this year. He's not a rim protector. So if Jared is compromised or even worse, can't play in some of these games, like this Cavs defense goes from a red flag to a fatal flaw.
I'm right there with you. And I mentioned this to you in passing over the last couple of days, right? When James Harden and Donovan Mitchell sat, that was the opportunity for Kenny Atkinson to show us that, hey, our defense isn't that bad. It's just we have two kind of liabilities defensively on the perimeter at least, right? Donovan's not a bad defender.
I think Donovan does certain things well. I think he defends the gaps well. I think he's a good defensive playmaker. But I do find it funny how many times we have to tap dance around the fact that, hey, Donovan's not a bad defender, but we do a lot of that. That's all I'll say.
For sure. And he, like you said, I think he plays the gaps well. He's in the passing lanes. He has long arms. But even though people like to say he's a little bit stronger, a little bit more burly than your regular 6'2" guards, he's still a 6'2" guard, right? James Harden, the Cavs had him guarding power forwards the other night because he cannot keep up with the guards at 36 years old. Has he ever really been able to? Not really. But the point of the matter is they had the opportunity to showcase that their defense was not an all-team problem against the Memphis Grizzlies when they had Donovan Mitchell and James Harden sidelined. They had Evan Mobley and Jared Allen on the floor, both playing 24 minutes plus, and they still gave up 126 points to the Memphis Grizzlies, who did not have Ty Jerome available. And the Memphis Grizzlies had 7 players in double figures and 3 players with 20 or more points. That doesn't dignify or signify to me that the defense doesn't have issues on the perimeter even without their 2-star offensive players. Again, the offense wasn't the problem. The Cavs ended up winning the game. They scored 142 points, but we're still looking at the defense. That's the biggest area of concern that we have going forward, especially into the postseason against a potent Atlanta Hawks offense, a physical Orlando Magic offense, and Toronto with great mid-range creators in Brandon Ingram, in RJ Barrett, and Scotty Barnes, who can play as well as anybody in transition.
So at the end of the season, some of these games cannot be so predictive. Teams are ready for the playoffs to start. I understand that. There's just not really any evidence that the Cavs are a good defense. Like, I've seen some stats floating around the internet about, oh, look at their defensive rating against top 10 teams in net rating this year. I'm telling you, I don't care. Like, I've seen it like time and time and time and time and time again. Jared Allen's good on defense. Evan Mobley's good on defense. Dean Wade is good on defense. Keon Ellis is active. Other than that, teams are feeling okay about their matchups against this team. This is gonna be a team, like I said a week and a half ago. This is gonna be a team that if they make a deep playoff run, they're gonna have an all-time offense and their defense is gonna be passable. It's gonna be 2022, 23 Denver Nuggets, like, good enough, connected in the right spots. I don't want to be dramatic. The defense is not really fixable. It's just you have to maximize what you have. and then lean into your strengths. And by the way, the offense can help the defense particularly against some of these transition heavy teams like Atlanta and Toronto and what have you. Like Boston will be opportunistic about pushing, particularly against the Cavs. By the way, everyone's probably gonna be opportunistic against pushing against the Cavs because they've been bad in transition this year on defense, right? But if you score enough, you can make them take it out from under the basket and at least set up your defense. So that's what we're dealing with here defensively.
Jimmy, to a point that you made the other day about offensive rebounding kind of playing into the hands of the transition defense, and I don't want to go too far into this, just the fact that Kenny Atkinson early into the season was like, we're still going to crash. We're still going to send three. We're going to allow Craig Porter Jr. because he has a knack for the basketball. You're still going to go and try and get offensive rebounds. That has been in part of leading to the Cavs' struggles when it comes to getting back in transition. Also doesn't help that James Harden, anytime he goes to the basket, it's likely he's not in the defensive play afterwards. But neither here nor there. We'll have to wait and find out how good or how poor the Cavs play defensively. And as Jimmy mentioned, if their offense is going to be able to save them and how long is that going to hold up. But that's a conversation that starts next week as the Cavs find out who they play in the first round of the Eastern Conference. I'm excited, Jimmy. I hope you are. And I appreciate you hopping on with me on this late night pod. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.